Hi, and welcome. My name is Chris Ryder, and today we are going to talk about bending steel. So there's a lot of different shapes that are out there when you go to purchase steel from a supplier, and there's multiple different grades. They're not putting steel out for hand bending for strongmen to be doing their art. They're putting them out for specific manufacturing goals. And we've got to learn what some of those goals are to get a starting point so that we can move forward and do what it is that we want to do. Some of the shapes that are out there very commonly is, for one, this is flat bar. This particular piece is 1/4 inch thick, 1 inch wide, and 45 inches long. Very common shape that you'll come across is the flat bar. Along with the flat bar is the square bar. This particular piece is 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch, and the length on this one's 38 5/8. No real rhyme or reason as to the lengths on these bars I chose today. They just happened to be what was laying on the pile when I grabbed them. Another very common size is 1/2 inch, and easily seen is round bar. 49 1/4 on this particular piece. We're going to come back to this one in just a moment. So we take a look at another round bar. This one's 5/8. Now looking at the two bars right off the bat, you should be able to pick out a little bit of a difference other than the size. One particular bar should stand out as being very shiny, and the other one rather dull. When we look closely at this dull bar, what we're actually seeing is what is called mill scale or slag. Whereas this bar, you don't see it, you just see the steel itself. During the manufacturing process between hot rolled and cold rolled steel, the hot rolled steel is heated up above the recrystallization temperature. It is then formed hot. When it cools back down, it'll recrystallize. And what that does is prevent the piece from getting what is known as work hardened. Where the cold rolled steel starts off as hot rolled, but then they go to do another manufacturing process to it to get it closer to the desired tolerances of size, this being 1/2 inch round. The hot rolled steel is a little bit out of tolerance. It's not quite as symmetrical in the end shape that they're looking to get, whereas the cold rolled is. But to get that final cold rolled finish, they're taking it at room temperature. When they're doing that, it's getting compressed. Everything is getting compressed, and it's not taken above the recrystallization temperature, meaning the inside structure of the steel is getting just mashed, which gets the I've got company. It sounds like my kitty is meowing. So it gets work hardened because it keeps getting all that pressure put on it in a cold state, and it can't recrystallize back. So it gets work hardened, so it's a lot harder. This is not what we are looking to use for steel bending. This has a lot more spring tension built up into it, which, especially for a novice, raises the percentage of injury because the bar is a lot more unpredictable. It's going to want to spring back from you. The further you bend it, the more resistance it gets, and it can get away from you a whole lot quicker than what the hot roll does. Just for a comparative figure, I don't have actual poundages per size, per length to give you for a comparison, but what I am going to give you is one of the trade comparisons, and that is the minimum yield strength. So what yield strength is the amount of pressure that it would take in pounds per square inch to deflect the bar into a bend. hot rolled steel, the minimum yield, now again, we want to take that into consideration. Minimum yield means it has to hit this standard. It can't drop below. It's the minimum. That doesn't mean that it has to stay there. It can shoot way off the chart. So just because it hits the minimum standard doesn't necessarily mean that's what it's going to take to bend it. It could be tremendously more difficult than what the standard is. But as a rule of thumb, the hot rolled is generally significantly less resistance than cold rolled. The industry standard for A36, which is the designation, hot rolled steel, is a minimum yield of 36,300 pounds per square inch. The cold rolled, that is also very easily found in the marketplace, is designated as 1018 cold rolled steel. The minimum yield for the cold rolled is 53,700. So we're looking at hot rolled for 36,300, cold rolled 53,700. That is a tremendous difference in the amount of pressure that it takes to bend the two bars. Now, we're going to go over a few bending styles to do the initial bend on a steel bar. This is considered to be a mid-length bend, and I have, just going to move this camera here so everybody can see me. We're going to go over a few different bending styles for starting the bar. First bend that I'm going to go over with you, I'm going to utilize this flat bar, 1/4x1, and this is one that I really like to use on stage. It also allows me versatility when I am doing my scroll work, which is my artistic designs, to get in different positions and be used to getting into different positions. So what I like to do with this bar is I like to bring it up over my arm and tuck it right to the inside of my thigh. I will reach over with my non-dominant hand. I've got the bar anchored behind my dominant hand. You can see the degree of angle that I'm going after with my arm. I am closer to my elbow. I'm closer to my shoulder. You can feel that that's not where you want that bar to be. You want to be right down, right about here. I'm tucked in. I've got my dominant hand up to the end of the bar. I'm going to come over with my non-dominant hand. I'm sinking into a horse stance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a big, deep breath, tighten everything up, and I'm going to drop into that stance as I pull the bar over. Just like that. I'll spin around, let you see where that bar is coming around. From here, what I like to do is simply spin around. I'm now taking my non-dominant hand against my non-dominant leg, dominant hand on top, and I'm coming right in against my rib cage. I'm not really pushing this with my arm. What I'm going to do is come down with my torso and take the bar right around. The over the leg style, or over the arm style rather. Next bend we're going to look at is starting a bend over the non-dominant leg. The crease of the hip, the knee. We want to be just below the crease of the hip, maybe the length of your index finger. we're going to center the bar right over that spot. And again, I'm sinking down into a soft stance. I'm not all the way down at 90 degrees, but I do have a nice soft stance. My non-dominant leg forward, dominant leg back. Almost like not a very deep lunge, just a shallow lunge position. Pushing down. Now, I'm going through these barehanded. If you would like some protection on your hands, things that you can utilize. Standard suede bending wraps work really well, just fold it over. You can also use gloves. If you try to wrap the ends of the bar, what happens is with all the length, it gets a little difficult to hold on to them. They end up unwrapping as you're trying to wrap the other side. So what I generally do with them is just fold them over the bar and grab a hold like that. We'll put this right into position. Again, we're going to take a deep breath. I've got my arms pretty much locked out and I'm shrugged up. As I go to hit the bar, I'm going to come down with my body weight and shrug down, a push down, just like this. We get the bar started, putting a kink in the bar. From here, you can then take the bar underneath your hamstring. Same leg, non-dominant leg. The bar's coming up right where the glute and the hamstring meet. I have a wider than shoulder stance with my feet evenly apart, meaning one foot isn't in back of the other. My heels are even to each other. And I have my arm locked out. What I'm going to do from here is I'm going to push my hips to the rear. That's going to put more tension into the bar, into my non-dominant hand. I'm going to lean forward. Now I'm going to do a cross body pull with my torso, where I'm taking my non-dominant shoulder and trying to take it to my dominant knee. And it looks like this. See how that pulls right around? From here, notice this rotation of my hand. I'm going to pull up. I'm getting my hand and my arm of my non-dominant side behind the bar, squeezing real tight, and I'm all the way up against my body. I'm not out here loose. Everything is tight. Dominant hand is tight against the dominant leg. Non-dominant hand is tight against the dominant side of the body. Again, great big air in. Non-dominant shoulder to dominant knee. Just like that. And then we'll switch the bar one more time. Non-dominant hand on the bottom into the non-dominant hip joint. Dominant hand on top, tight against the ribs. Big breath. And just crunch it down. See this move? I went from my ribs. As the bend is getting tighter, I'm coming down to my abs. And come over one more time. As you get more comfortable within the moves, you can skip this. A lot of people like pushing down over the top of the thigh to start the bar. It's very easy to see where the bar is going to start. And it's a natural motion to push down. So a lot of people like to use that as a progression. from moving into the hamstring, behind the hamstring pull. I'm going to take this 1/2 inch square bar and I'm just going to go right behind the hamstring. Okay, see my positionings here. Now setting up with this, we want the bend to end up in the center of the bar. For that to happen, you can see how off-center my setup is. The reason for that, as this bar comes up around the non-dominant leg, the bend radius is going to go into this side. We need to have more of that bar exposed so the bend radius can run over that side. Another thing to know about the square bar is square steel most of the time will bend on the corner, not on the flat. That tends to make this not the most comfortable bend, but you should know that going into the bend sequence. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a strong, solid grip on the bar with my dominant hand. Same thing with my non-dominant hand. My palms on both hands are facing forward. The bar is running in my hand right against my dominant thigh for bracing, coming up between where the hamstring and glute meet. I'm going to take a big air, drive my hips back to tighten the bar to get tension, and then I'm going to use my core strength to pull my non-dominant shoulder to my dominant knee. I'm not curling the bar. My arms and my hands are just hooks. Okay, here we go. Soon as that comes around, I'm right in that position again so that I can get my hand and my forearm behind the bar instead of pulling. I just rotate up. You can see how I'm taking my torso also and getting a little bit more behind the bar. You can also, you've got some wiggle room to get it set up to where you want it, but you should maintain contact with the inside of the bend radius to that spot on the back of your non-dominant leg where the glute and the hamstring meet. You don't want the bar just flopping around out here. You want to keep everything tight. Okay, another big air in, tightening everything up, and then again, going to take the non-dominant shoulder to the dominant knee. Just like that. Pull the bar out, come around. Now here's an interesting thing to take a look at. One side is a little bit longer than the other. As we're setting up into this next position, it works better if you put the shorter leg in the non-dominant hand. Non-dominant hand goes to the non-dominant hip joint. Everything's tight. My wrist is right back in my hip joint. Tight and solid. Dominant hand stacked on top. Comes right in and braces against the torso by the rib cage. Going to take a big breath in and come down with the torso. Right here, I want you to pay attention to something. I'm going to get a little closer to the camera. As I'm coming down, look at how close my face is to the bend radius. If we look at this bar real close, you can see the slag is cracking. Depending on the bar that you're using and how thick the slag is, you want to be very mindful of where your face is, if your mouth is open, if your eyes are open. Because what can happen if you're like looking right at this bar and you go to give it bend and that slag explodes off of the bar, you're going to get a face full. It's not pleasant, it doesn't taste good, and it's terrible to get out of your eyes. So we want to avoid that. As we're coming down for this last position, what I'm going to do is get everything braced in tight, just like we talked about. Take a big breath. I'm going to close my eyes and look away from the bend radius. Just like that. Now, just to show you the comparison in these bend radiuses, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit this piece of cold rolled steel as well. First thing we're going to look at in comparing the two. Hot rolled bend, very symmetrical, very smooth, very round. Cold rolled bend, it looks more like an A. This bar was bending everywhere. It followed a nice curved pattern. This thing didn't want to really bend anywhere. And if we look close, we can see bending points here, here, and here. The further this bends, the more pronounced that will get, as well as the spring factor of this bar. So what I'm going to do is just demonstrate some of the spring tension. See how close I put that together? And it just pops right back apart. Pushed it together so that it was clicking, and it just came right back apart. That's one of the big problems with the cold rolled steel. It's not really good stuff to be bending for this style of bending. Cold rolled steel works a lot better if you're going to be doing something that's called short steel bending, which is done just with the hands. But that is a topic for another day. I want to thank everybody for joining me on this live feed for bending steel. This is your introduction and beginner's bends. For anyone who would like to go deeper with bending steel, I am available through my Skype internet video coaching program, as well as workshops where I come to a gym near you. For more information about my coaching programs, you can email me at chris@coachchrisrider.com. Thanks everybody. See you next time.